December 2, Etusinne og Nihundred og Fyrofyr, Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow was not falling so much as attacking sideways small knives of ice, driven by a wind that knew no direction, only purpose. By nightfall, the forest had become a monochrome graveyard of branches and wrecked trucks. Everything human looked temporary. Everything white looked eternal. Private First Class Levi Conincaid crouched behind a frozen berm, the metal of his rifle stuck faintly to his glove. In his left hand, he held something that did not belong in war, a small brass compass, scratched, light, and absurd. It spun once, then steadied at 196 degrees southwest. He trusted that number more than he trusted prayer. He wasn't supposed to be here. None of them were. The Ardennes line, this quiet sector, had been chosen for its stillness, a rest area for half-recovered divisions, a sleepy corner of the front, as command briefings called it. But now, a German offensive was ripping through the forest like fire through paper. It was Hitler's last gamble, Operation Wacht am Rhein, the so-called Watch on the Rhine. 300,000 German troops, 1,400 tanks, and the arrogance of desperation. Their target, the port of Antwerp. Their weapon, surprise. Levi listened. He didn't need binoculars or a radio. The forest itself was a map if you knew how to read it. The wind carried the low thunder of engines from somewhere beyond the ridge, deep, rolling, heavier than any Sherman. Panzers, 2 at least, maybe more behind. The sound wasn't just noise, it was math, tonnage, distance, torque, direction. He could feel their angle through the soles of his boots. His platoon, a handful of combat engineers borrowed from 3 other companies, had been ordered to hold the road junction. No name, no reinforcements, just coordinates on a paper now soaked through. They had one 57mm anti-tank gun, 2 bazookas, a crate of mines, and nerves thin as wire. That was the entire front line between Bastogne and annihilation. Levi was not a hero, not in the usual sense. Before the war, he'd paced property lines in Maine's pine country, a surveyor's apprentice who measured land by steps and angles. He knew that the difference between a good reading and a bad one could send you miles off course. Precision was his religion. That small brass compass, cheap, wobbly, something his aunt had slipped into his palm at Bangor Station, was his relic. "To keep you pointed home," she'd said. The soldiers called it the cereal box special. One sergeant had laughed so hard he dropped his cigarette. But now, in the white chaos of Belgium, that toy was the only thing that made sense. The cold was the kind that steals memory. Breathing hurt, metal snapped. The sky hung low and uncommitted, a smothered grey lid. The men spoke less each hour, their words turning to frost before they reached the air. Somewhere to the south, the 106th Infantry Division was collapsing under German armor. Somewhere north, Bastogne was about to be surrounded. Levi didn't know it then, but history was tightening around them like a fist. He wiped frost from the compass face and pressed it flat to his knee. 196 degrees southwest, always that number. That was the bend in the road, the place where a tank, no matter its armor or pride, would have to turn its flank. That curve was geometry's revenge on steel. Behind him, Sergeant Fallon cursed the ground. "Can't dig a goddamn inch." Frozen like a coffin lid. Levi said nothing. He marked distances with his boot heel, counting quietly. 8 steps to the ridge, 15 to the blind corner. A perfect line of fire if the gun could be angled just right. "Hey, Captain Compass," someone shouted. "You gonna find Santa with that thing?" Laughter broke, brittle and brief, before the wind erased it. Levi only said, "We'll find something." He moved through the snow like a man assembling a map from memory, checking sightlines, drawing invisible arcs with his gloved hand. Every feature mattered. A fallen spruce, a ditch, the slope of frozen mud. Terrain didn't lie, people did. If the German armor followed the route he predicted, the first tank would swing broadside at exactly 196 degrees. That's when the 57mm gun, light but quick, could bite into its side armor before the turret could even turn. The entire plan depended on 5 seconds and one line on a compass that no one respected. He returned to the command tent, a canvas shell half buried in snow. Inside, Lieutenant Parker, all youth and caffeine, studied a damp map under the weak yellow light of a lantern. Levi laid his own map over it, finger tracing the curve. Here, the road bends southwest. If we set the gun here, he pointed, they'll have to turn into it. Their flank will be exposed. 5 seconds, maybe 6. Parker frowned at the compass in Levi's hand. You're basing this on that toy? I'm basing it on terrain, Levi said. The compass just tells me I'm right. A pause, then laughter again. Nervous, the kind that fills cold air because no one knows what else to do. Fallon muttered, well, hell, if we're gonna might as well creatively. By dusk, the decision was made not out of faith, but lack of options. The ground was too hard to dig, so they built their defense out of deception. Levi directed them with the same quiet authority he'd once used over boundary lines. Drag that burned Jeep there, he said. Angle it like it slid off the road. Fake tracks, 3 sets, heading north. Lay the mines shallow, half a boot deep. Snow'll cover the rest. His words came clipped, mechanical, a rhythm of survival. They were building a lie precise enough to save them. The snow thickened until the world looked erased. Under Levi's guidance, they turned absence into camouflage. He stood over the 57mm gun, tracing its sight arc with a piece of cord, adjusting by inches. Lower. A little more. That's it. The loader grunted. The wheels froze. Every movement scraped metal against ice. Yet, when the gun finally locked in place, Levi looked through the iron sight and felt the calm click of rightness. The numbers matched, the compass needle aligned, logic in a world without mercy. Hours passed. The forest settled. By midnight, the temperature had dropped below 20 degrees. Levi walked the perimeter alone. His boots cracked the crusted snow, leaving neat prints like coordinates. Somewhere in the dark, he heard the groan of trees under weight, a branch breaking like a rifle shot. He looked up. The sky was a smear of white and smoke. He took out the compass again, its brass rim glowing faintly in the reflection of the moon. The glass was fogged. He wiped it clean with his sleeve. The needle wavered, then steadied, 196 degrees. Always there. He thought about Maine, the smell of pine sap, the slow rivers half frozen in March, his mother's diner opening before dawn. He thought about the simplicity of a place where direction meant home, not survival. And then he pushed it away. There was no home right now, only geometry and cold. He checked on the gun crew. The loader sat wrapped in a blanket, chewing on a frozen biscuit. You really think this'll work? The man asked. Levi didn't answer. He looked at the ridge, the road beyond it, the white silence where something monstrous was coming. It has to. At 1:17 hours, the forest shifted. A vibration ran through the snow, low, steady, unnatural. The men froze. Levi raised a hand. Engines. The sound grew, deep grinding metal pulling against frozen earth. The first tank, then another, then another. They couldn't see them yet, but they could feel them. The ground itself seemed to breathe heavy. Inside his chest, Levi's heartbeat matched the rhythm of the Panzer's mechanical, merciless. He crouched by the gun, touched the compass once more, felt its warmth against his glove. 196 degrees. He whispered the number like a prayer. Behind him, Sergeant Fallon murmured, "Here we go." Snow began to lift off the ground in little spirals from the vibrations. Somewhere, a man's teeth chattered loud enough to sound like gunfire. Levi's voice cut through it. "Hold, wait for the turn." 5 words, clear, exact. The voice of a man who saw the war not as chaos, but as lines intersecting at one lethal point. Then, through the fog, the first tank appeared gray, massive, cross-marked, crawling through the bend like a moving building. The forest held its breath. Levi lifted his hand. The gunner's finger tightened. Not yet. Another second. The tank's flank rotated fully into view. Now, the shot split the night apart. The 57mm cannon kicked backward, screaming metal and recoil. The shell hit low, near the engine deck, a flash like the birth of a small Sunday sparks, smoke, then the howl of ruptured steel. The Panzer shuddered, spun halfway, its left tread blown free. The gun crew reloaded, shouting numbers. Levi never looked away. Behind him, the bazooka team prepared. The second tank lurched, gears grinding, snow exploding from its treads. The bazooka fired a hiss, then a crack. The second tank jolted to a stop, nose buried in snow. For a moment, the forest itself went silent again. No cheers, no movement, only the hiss of burning oil and the distant creak of trees bending under the heat. Levi felt nothing. Only the cold and the quiet confirmation of a calculation proved right. He touched the compass again. The needle trembled, alive, pointing southwest through the smoke. He looked up, past the fire, toward that direction, homeward, maybe, or deeper, into history. And as the snow fell sideways once more, burying color, covering blood, Levi Conincaid understood the cruel arithmetic of the Ardennes. Sometimes survival isn't luck. It's geometry, discipline, and the refusal to doubt your own measure of truth. The snow did not stop. It only learned how to fall slower, quieter, as if the sky had decided to whisper instead of scream. By the afternoon of December 20th, 1944, the forest around Private First Class Levi Conincaid looked less like Europe and more like a frozen page that someone had tried to erase. Every tree, every branch, every face was bleached into the same ghostly color. Only motion separated the living from the dead. Levi walked that road alone, boots cracking the crust of snow with every step. In his left hand, the compass, its brass skin dulled by frost. In his right, a folded map so wet, it clung to his glove like tissue. Wind scraped through the trees, dragging curtains of snow across the road, and Levi stopped at the bend, exactly 196 degrees southwest from camp. The compass needle quivered once, then settled. That was the angle. That was the trap. He crouched low, drew a line in the snow with his bayonet, then paced back 12 steps, counting under his breath. He could see it clearly in his mind. The first German tank would come around that curve, heavy and proud, its left side exposed for 5 seconds. 5 seconds was all he needed to break the machine's arrogance. Geometry, not luck. Behind him, the forest groaned under ice. He turned back toward camp, toward the tent where voices were already rising, the sound of men trying to make sense of dying orders. Inside the canvas command tent, a lantern burned too bright, throwing long shadows across the map table. The air was thick with breath and doubt. Lieutenant Parker stood over the map, red-eyed, jaw tight, his finger tracing a line that no longer existed. "We hold this road," he said, voice firm but fraying at the edges. "Orders from division. If armor comes through, we fall back to Bastogne." Levi stepped inside, snow melting off his helmet. "If armor comes through," he said quietly, "we won't get the chance to fall back." The room stilled. He spread the map flat, pressing the compass against it. "Here," he said, pointing. 196 degrees southwest. The road bends. They'll have to slow. When they do, they'll turn their flank toward us. That's where we hit them." One corporal snorted. "Based on what? That cereal box toy?" Levi ignored it. "Based on terrain," he said, "and math. If we place the 57mm gun here," he tapped the edge of the map, "we'll have a clean shot before they can traverse the turret. 5 seconds of exposure, enough for one hit." Lieutenant Parker leaned back. "And if you're wrong?" Levi met his eyes. "Then we won't be here to argue about it." Silence stretched. The lantern hissed. Outside, the wind pressed snow against the tent like hands on a coffin lid. Finally, Parker exhaled, the fight leaving his shoulders. "Do it," he said. "Set your geometry." That was how the trap began, not with courage, but with resignation. By dusk, the forest had turned into a factory of sound. The men were working fast, dragging equipment, shoveling, coughing, cursing through the cold. Levi directed them with calm precision. "Haul the gun there," he ordered. "Angle it 10 degrees off the ridge. Keep the barrel low." They pushed the 57mm anti-tank gun through the snow, its wheels grinding in frozen ruts. The weapon was small by tank standards, barely capable of scratching a tiger's armor, but Levi wasn't aiming for glory. He was aiming for physics. Nearby, 2 men hauled the burned-out carcass of a jeep toward the bend in the road. "Tilt it," Levi said. "Make it look like it slid off." They obeyed, dragging it sideways until it leaned into the snowbank. Then they scattered fake tire tracks, the illusion of retreat. Others set mines in shallow pits, their gloves stiff with ice. The ground was too hard to dig, so they covered the charges with powdery snow and branches. Levi marked each one with snapped twigs, a code only he understood. The work was slow, brutal, fed by belief. Each man moved as if every shovel of snow was a prayer. The forest creaked above them, the sky dimmed from gray to iron. When the light finally died, Levi walked the perimeter alone. He checked distances, tested angles. His boots sank deep where the snow had drifted, and his breath came out in short, visible bursts. Everything was in place: the mines, the decoy, the gun. Even the snow itself had become part of the plan, a silent accomplice to deception. He stopped by the 57mm gun. The crew huddled there, faces ghostly in the half-light. The sergeant looked up. "You sure about this, Compass?" Levi nodded. "As sure as I can be without God talking." The sergeant smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if he's got your coordinates, maybe he'll send weather support." They laughed, dry, hollow, necessary. By 2300 hours, the men were ghosts themselves, moving through the snow in whispers. Levi walked from team to team, checking every detail. "Keep low," he said. "No smoking, no sound." At the curve, the decoy jeep sat half-buried, its metal crusted in frost. A shredded tarp hung from a tree above it, flapping weakly. From a distance, it looked like a retreat in panic, a broken American column. Levi crouched and studied the road. It bent just as he'd measured, curving southwest into darkness. Beyond that, the forest thickened a black wall, hiding whatever thunder would soon crawl through it. He looked down at his compass again. 196 degrees. Still right. Still true. The wind eased for a moment, and in that rare stillness, he could hear his own heartbeat. It was steady, reliable, like the needle that had never lied. Back at the ridge, Lieutenant Parker paced, mumbling about backup that wouldn't come. Their radio had gone silent. Hours ago, frozen batteries, broken signal, or both. The nearest reinforcements were miles away, already fighting to keep Bastogne open. They were alone now, a handful of men standing between the enemy and a road that history would forget to name. Levi crouched near the gun, tracing numbers in his notebook. Distance, 210 yards. Angle, 196 degrees. Wind, 12 knots from the east. He wasn't just writing figures, he was building certainty. In a war built on chaos, numbers were his armor. At midnight, the temperature dropped again. The forest went still, and the stars disappeared behind a moving ceiling of fog. One man whispered, "Feels like the world's holding its breath." Levi didn't answer. He was listening to the far edge of the dark, where faint vibrations began to roll through the frozen ground. Engines. Not trucks, not jeeps. Tanks, heavy ones. The sound deepened, a slow metallic thunder fed by distance. The men froze. Some looked at Levi. He didn't speak. He just raised his hand, palm flat, and pointed toward the bend. Through the trees, the first low glimmer of headlight flickered in the fog, like the eye of something prehistoric. The ground trembled. Snow sifted off the branches in tiny avalanches. Levi turned back to the gun crew. "Load one." The loader's hands shook as he slid the shell into place, metal on metal. A soft click. Levi crouched by the wheel, eyes fixed on the road. "Wait for the flank," he whispered. The first Panzer was close now. He could hear its treads grinding through ice, could feel the vibration in his teeth. Then another engine behind it, and another. A column, at least 3. The plan would have to work. He checked the compass once more. The needle trembled, then froze in perfect alignment. He smiled faintly. The toy was still telling the truth. "Ready," the gunner mouthed. Levi's heart counted seconds. 1, 2, 3. The tank's shape emerged from the fog, massive, iron, indifferent. The road curved. It slowed. The left flank came into view. Levi's hand stayed up, steady as the barrel itself. 5 seconds. That was all geometry ever promised. 5 seconds between theory and death. He waited for the right angle, then whispered, "Now." The 57mm cannon roared. The recoil slammed back, shaking the ridge. The shell tore through the fog like lightning, hitting low on the Panzer's side. A burst of sparks, a metallic scream, and then fire, small at first, then growing. The second tank behind it tried to reverse, gears grinding. The bazooka team fired one streak of smoke, one explosion. Within 10 seconds, the forest was chaos. Fire and snow clashed, turning white to grey. Levi ducked behind the gun shield, shouting new orders. "Reload! Hold your fire until they move again." He peeked over the ridge. The first Panzer was still burning, its left tread blown apart. The second had stopped dead, smoke pouring from its rear hatch. The road was blocked perfectly, exactly as planned. He felt no joy, no triumph, only a grim satisfaction that the numbers had been right. Behind him, Sergeant Fallon yelled, "Hell of a shot, Compass." Levi just nodded. "We bought time." The men looked at him, some laughing, some trembling, some staring at the flames as if hypnotized. But Levi's eyes were already on the compass again. It glowed faintly in the reflected firelight, the needle pointing southwest, unwavering. That was when he noticed something else. The sound had stopped. The world was holding still again. Smoke drifted sideways. Snow fell over the burning tanks like ash. He knew it wasn't over. He knew more would come. But for now, for this night, they had turned the math of war in their favor. Hours later, when the fires died to embers, the men sat in silence. No one spoke of victory. They just sat with their rifles across their knees, steam rising from their clothes. Levi cleaned the compass with a rag, brushing away soot and frost. The glass was cracked now, but the needle still moved. He thought of Maine again, of rivers frozen mid-current, of his aunt's smile at the train station. "To keep you pointed home," she had said. In the distance, the echo of engines faded deeper into the forest. Reinforcements would come, or they wouldn't. Either way, the road was blocked, the flank broken, the clock slowed. Levi looked at his men, their faces drawn, their eyes hollow but alive, and felt something like gratitude, not for victory, but for endurance. They had defied the cold, the steel, the mockery, and even the odds. The compass needle steadied. So did Levi's breath. Somewhere beyond the snow, beyond the burning wrecks, history was already turning its page. And on that page, drawn faintly in the margin, was a single angle 196 degrees southwest. The line where one man's belief became geometry, where a toy compass stopped a war machine, where survival turned into legend. Dawn never really came to the Ardennes that morning, just a softer shade of grey. The forest lay drowned in silence, a cathedral of ice. Every branch dripped with frost, every breath hung in the air like smoke from an unseen fire. It was December 21st, 1944, the fourth day of Hitler's final gamble. And in a nameless pocket of snow between Bastogne and the German line, a few dozen American soldiers were preparing to rewrite the geometry of survival. Levi Conincaid crouched behind the 57mm anti-tank gun, gloved hands tight around the frozen wheel. The metal bit back with its own kind of hunger. Around him, men moved in whispers, checking rifles, brushing snow from sights, adjusting the white sheets that passed for camouflage. Every movement felt like theft of heat, of time, of life. They were stealing minutes from death itself. Far down the road, the sound began again. Not loud at first, just a deep, rolling growl that made the snow tremble. Tank engines, the kind that didn't rush or roar, but advanced. Heavy, methodical, unstoppable. Levi could feel it in his boots before he could hear it in his ears. The air itself seemed to lean toward the noise. He took out his compass, cracked glass, fogged face, brass rim blackened by soot. The needle shivered, then steadied on the same line it always had, 196 degrees southwest. That was the number. That was the truth. Behind him, the loader whispered, "They're coming, boss." Levi didn't answer. He just raised one finger. Silence. He could see his own breath swirl around that single motion, thin, fragile, human. The tanks were close now, closer than sound should allow. The fog carried their shapes like ghosts wrapped in smoke. Levi could make out the rhythm of treads, the pause before a gear shift, the distant creak of armor bending cold air. One tank, maybe two, maybe more. His body felt the math before his mind confirmed it. They were right on schedule. "Hold steady," he said quietly. The men obeyed not because they trusted him, but because they needed to trust something. The first shadow emerged from the fog, a Panzer IV, its hull coated in ice, the iron cross faint but visible beneath snow and grime. It looked less like a vehicle and more like a moving cliff. Behind it, another loomed, and another still, their turrets rotating slowly, scanning the road like predators sniffing blood. Levi's trap was waiting for them. The curve of the road forced the lead tank to turn left exactly 196 degrees southwest. The terrain itself had become a weapon. Every inch of ice and dirt had been calculated, every angle aligned to that broken compass in his hand. He raised his fist. The loader froze, the gunner's breath caught. Levi waited 1 second, 2. The tank's left side came into view, heavy armor gleaming faintly through snow. It was perfect. He lowered his hand. The forest exploded. The 57mm gun kicked backward with a roar that split the stillness. The recoil smashed Levi's shoulder into the ridge, the air filling with fire and splinters of ice. The shell screamed down the road and hit the Panzer square on the flank low, near the engine deck. A thunderclap of steel and fuel. Flames burst from the vents, white at first, then orange, licking upward like breath from hell. The German tank shuddered, stalled, and began to twist sideways, its treads digging furrows into the snow. The second Panzer braked hard behind it, gears grinding. The third reversed, panic spreading through the line. Levi didn't blink. "Reload." The loader slammed another shell into the breach. Smoke rolled over them like fog from the grave. Levi coughed, eyes watering, but his focus stayed sharp. He could see through chaos, through snow, through fear. "Hold, wait for the second," he said. The next Panzer swung slightly, its turret searching for a target. Too slow. Levi dropped his hand again. The second round fired shorter range, higher aim. The shells struck just under the turret ring. The blast tore through armor, sparks spitting out like fireflies in a storm. For a second, the tank hesitated, its gun twitching upward. Then the hatch burst open and a crewman climbed out, screaming, covered in soot and flame. The forest turned into a machine of noise engines, revving, guns barking, metal clanging, men shouting in languages that all meant the same thing: fear. Bazooka teams on the flank fired next. The whoosh cut through the cold, followed by another explosion. The third Panzer jerked violently, its right tread blown free. Snow and debris showered the road. Smoke rolled into the trees. It had taken 13 seconds. 3 tanks stopped, 2 burning, 1 trapped. Levi exhaled, his body shaking with the aftershock. But the fight wasn't over. Machine gun fire erupted from somewhere behind the wreckage. The Germans inside the second tank were still alive, spraying blindly into the forest. Bullets carved through tree trunks, sending splinters whistling past Levi's face. He hit the ground, rolling behind the gun shield. "Hold your positions," he shouted. "Don't break." Rounds pinged off the frozen metal around them. One struck the 57mm barrel, sending a flash of sparks into the air. The gunner ducked, cursed, and waited for the next cue. Levi peeked through the scope, through smoke, through fog, and saw the second tank's turret swinging, searching. "Now!" he yelled. The 57mm fired again. The blast shook the ridge. The shell hit home straight into the damaged flank of the tank. The explosion was muffled, almost dignified. Then the turret popped like a cork, launching smoke and flame into the sky. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of steam as fire met snow. When the echo finally faded, the forest was no longer white. It was grey, blackened, scarred by light. Levi pushed himself to his feet, body trembling from recoil and adrenaline. He looked down the road. 2 burning wrecks blocked it completely. The third was immobilized. He whispered to himself, "That's time. We bought time." The smoke thickened, swirling between the trees. Levi waved his men forward. "Check the crews. Be careful, there might be survivors." They moved slowly, rifles raised. The first tank's hatch creaked open. A German commander crawled out, face burned, uniform smoldering. He coughed, eyes wild with pain. A private aimed his rifle. "Hold," Levi said sharply. He stepped closer, keeping his voice steady. "Drop it." He ordered not to the German, but to his own man. The private hesitated. "Sir," "Drop it." The rifle lowered. The German fell to his knees in the snow, blood steaming as it hit the ice. Levi looked at him, not as an enemy, but as another man caught in someone else's plan. The silence after battle was its own kind of noise, louder, heavier, filled with what-ifs. Behind them, one of the bazooka men was crying quietly, hands shaking. The loader vomited into the snow. Someone started to laugh, not out of joy, but disbelief. Levi walked back to the gun and sat beside it. He could feel the heat from the wrecks warming his face. For a moment, it almost felt like sunlight. By 0600 hours, the flames had burned themselves out. The road was now a wall of steel and ash. The air stank of fuel and metal. Levi took out his notebook, his handwriting shaky. Distance, EQs on yards. Rounds fired, 3. Tanks stopped, 3. Casualties, unknown. He closed the book. Facts were easier than feelings. Lieutenant Parker found him there, sitting by the gun. His voice was hoarse. "You did it," he said. "We stopped them." Levi shook his head. "We slowed them." And that was the truth. In war, delay was as valuable as victory. Every hour they held here meant another hour for Bastogne to dig in, for Patton to move north, for the line to hold. The entire German offensive, fed by the illusion of speed, was now bleeding time into the snow. Parker crouched beside him. "You ever think you'd be the one saving Europe with a compass?" Levi smiled faintly. "I thought I'd just die with it." By late morning, the radio sputtered back to life static, then a broken voice. "Whiskey 12, this is command. Report status." Parker grabbed the mic. "Enemy armor neutralized. Road impassable. Repeat, road impassable." Command replied, "Copy that. Hold your ground. Reinforcements inbound, ETA unknown." Unknown. That word hung in the air like frost. Levi stood, looking down the road at the twisted metal hulks that used to be invincible. The snow was already reclaiming them, softening the edges, covering the tracks. Soon, no one would know what happened here, just another white field, another forgotten bend. But he knew. He had the bearing memorized. 196 degrees southwest. A line that had separated victory from extinction. He slid the compass back into his pocket. The glass was cracked, but the needle still worked. It always did. By 0600 hours, the flames had burned themselves out. The road was now a wall of steel and ash. The air stank of fuel and metal. Levi took out his notebook, his handwriting shaky. Distance, EQs on yards. Rounds fired, 3. Tanks stopped, 3. Casualties, unknown. He closed the book. Facts were easier than feelings. Lieutenant Parker found him there, sitting by the gun. His voice was hoarse. "You did it," he said. "We stopped them." Levi shook his head. "We slowed them, and that was the truth. In war, delay was as valuable as victory. Every hour they held here meant another hour for Bastogne to dig in, for Patton to move north, for the line to hold. The entire German offensive, fed by the illusion of speed, was now bleeding time into the snow. Parker crouched beside him. "You ever think you'd be the one saving Europe with a compass?" Levi smiled faintly. "I thought I'd just die with it." By late morning, the radio sputtered back to life static. Then a broken voice. "Whiskey 12, this is command. Report status." Parker grabbed the mic. "Enemy armor neutralized. Road impassable. Repeat, road impassable." Command replied, "Copy that. Hold your ground. Reinforcements inbound, ETA unknown." Unknown. That word hung in the air like frost. Levi stood, looking down the road at the twisted metal hulks that used to be invincible. The snow was already reclaiming them, softening the edges, covering the tracks. Soon, no one would know what happened here, just another white field, another forgotten bend. But he knew. He had the bearing memorized, 196 degrees southwest, a line that had separated victory from extinction. He slid the compass back into his pocket. The glass was cracked, but the needle still worked. It always did. That night, the men built a small fire behind the ridge. The wind carried the smell of oil and pine. No one talked much. The war still raged somewhere beyond the forest, but for now, they had carved out a silence of their own. Levi sat apart, staring at the sky. The clouds had lifted, revealing a few weak stars. He thought of Maine, of his aunt's diner, opening before dawn, of coffee steam rising just like this smoke. He wondered if she'd ever know what her gift had done. He pulled the compass out again and held it to the firelight. The brass reflected the flames, glowing like something alive. The needle trembled once, then pointed steady southwest, always southwest. In that direction lay the road, the wrecks, and a memory carved into ice. In that direction lay the proof that logic could stand against chaos, that faith could live inside geometry. He closed his hand around it, feeling its weight. It was small, too small to mean anything to most men, but to him it held the world's last piece of order. Somewhere beyond the forest, the thunder of distant guns echoed again, faint but growing. The war was far from over, but Levi Conincaid, the quiet engineer with the toy compass, had already turned the tide, 1 degree at a time. Tomorrow would bring more tanks, more frost, more noise. But tonight, there was fire, and for the first time in days, warmth. The fire burned low, a dark orange glow under the snow-heavy branches. It wasn't warmth that drew them closer, it was light, the one thing the night couldn't steal. The battle had ended hours ago, yet the sound of it still echoed in their bones. The men of Whiskey 12 sat in silence, their faces drawn tight, their breath fogging in rhythm. Somewhere down the road, 2 German tanks still smoked, their hulks frozen in surrender to the cold. Levi Conincaid stood apart, one boot braced against the wheel of the 57mm gun, the other buried in half-melted snow. The metal hissed faintly where ice met heat. His gloves were gone. His hands were raw, streaked black from gunpowder. The brass compass lay open in his palm. It had cracked when the gun recoiled, a thin vein of glass running across its face. The needle still pointed true. The forest was silent now, too silent. No wind, no engines, only the small sounds of men still alive, fabric shifting, metal clinking, breath catching. After battle, silence wasn't peace. It was suspense, the kind that made you wonder if the world had stopped or was just waiting for you to notice it had. Levi turned when he heard footsteps crunching through the snow. Private Dale, 19, thin as wire, carried a rifle too big for his shoulders. His face was red from the cold, but his eyes burned with something else. Rage. "Sir," he said, voice trembling, one of them still breathing. Levi followed him down the ridge toward the wreck. The first Panzer lay sideways across the road. Its left track snapped clean off, the steel twisted like a wound. Smoke poured from the engine deck, thick and bitter, curling into the grey sky. The snow around it was stained black and red. A figure moved near the hatch, German, young, crawling. His helmet was gone, his hands bare and bleeding, leaving streaks on the snow like ink on paper. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was just trying to get away from the fire. Dale lifted his rifle. The barrel shook, but his finger didn't. "Bastard killed Tom," he said. Levi saw the tears frozen on his cheeks. "Drop it," Levi said quietly. The private didn't move. "Sir, he killed Tom. Drop it." For a long moment, the air seemed to hold both of them in place, the boy and the man, the rifle and the compass, the hate and the weight of restraint. Then Dale's arm fell. The rifle hit the snow with a dull sound. He turned away, jaw trembling. Levi stepped forward. The German soldier was younger than he looked, no more than 20. His right sleeve was torn away, his arm slick with blood. He raised it slowly, trembling. "Nicht schießen," he whispered. "No shoot." His voice cracked, raw and small against the silence. Levi knelt, not to help, not to judge, but to see. The man's face was pale under soot, his eyes bright with disbelief that he was still alive. Behind them, the fire ate through the last of the tank's fuel, flames spitting through the vents like breath. The smell of burning oil filled the air thick, metallic, unforgettable. Levi reached for his canteen, unscrewed the cap, and set it in the snow near the German's hand. "Drink," he said. The man hesitated, then did. Water spilled down his chin, mixing with blood. He coughed once, then twice, and whispered something Levi couldn't catch. A name, maybe, or a prayer. For a moment, everything stopped: the cold, the smoke, the war. Just two soldiers in the same winter, both too young to be anything else. Behind them, Lieutenant Parker approached, breath fogging. "What's this?" he asked. "Prisoner," Levi said. "Alive?" "For now." Parker looked at the German, then at Levi. His jaw tightened. "You should have let the kid finish it. Less risk that way." Levi didn't answer. He just closed the compass and slipped it back into his pocket. "We're done killing for tonight." By morning, the snow had covered the battlefield like an apology. The wrecks looked ancient now, two frozen beasts lying side by side, steam still rising faintly from their flanks. The forest smelled of oil and ash, like the aftermath of some industrial storm. The sun didn't rise, it just appeared, weak and indifferent. The men moved through the wreckage, scavenging ammunition and supplies. Levi joined them, his steps slow, methodical. He wasn't looking for loot, he was looking for evidence. The tracks told a story, one written in steel and geometry. The Panzers had entered the bend, confident, predictable. They had died in precision. He crouched beside one of the burned treads and touched the ice-caked metal. War, he thought, was just another kind of engineering structures built to collapse perfectly. The prisoner, the German, had survived the night. He lay inside the tent, wrapped in a blanket. A medic had bandaged his arm. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was fluent enough. Levi watched him for a while, then stepped outside. Parker was waiting by the road, clipboard in hand. "Command got your report," he said. "They're calling it a successful delay." Levi gave a short laugh. "Delay, that's a polite way to say we almost died." "Every hour counts," Parker said. "Patton's Third Army is moving north. We just bought them time." Levi nodded. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had done his math right. Later that day, reinforcements arrived, a convoy of engineers and medics. They brought hot coffee, replacement rounds, and a question that no one could answer. How did you stop tanks with one gun? No one answered because there wasn't a word for it. Luck, skill, stubborn geometry? The men just looked at Levi. He said nothing. They buried Tom that afternoon, the boy who hadn't survived the first shot. The ground was too frozen to dig deep, so they built the grave with stones and snow. Someone said a prayer. Someone else muttered that it wouldn't matter. Levi said nothing. He just stood there, helmet in hand, watching the wind erase the footprints around the mound. When it was over, he sat by himself near the ridge, the compass in his hand again. He watched the needle tremble, then steady. Southwest, always southwest. He thought about the boy he hadn't let shoot and the man he hadn't let die. Both had been inches from crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. War, he realized, wasn't fought between nations. It was fought between impulses, the one that told you to destroy and the one that whispered, "Don't." By evening, the sky darkened again. Snow began to fall heavier, burying the wrecks, muffling the forest. The men gathered around the gun to share what rations they had left. A can of peaches, a few biscuits, coffee so weak it tasted like boiled dirt. But they laughed. Real laughter this time, shaky but alive. The sergeant handed Levi a cup, grinning through cracked lips. "To Captain Compass," he said, "the man who made math deadly." Levi shook his head. "Math doesn't kill," he said. "People do." The laughter faded, but the truth lingered like smoke. A courier from HQ arrived just before midnight. He brought a written commendation, typed words on a thin sheet of paper that would travel farther than any of them. It called the action a strategic defense, resulting in the neutralization of 3 armored units. No mention of the compass, no mention of restraint, just results, numbers, and names. Levi folded the paper once and tucked it into his coat. He didn't need the record. The compass was record enough. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the dying fire, listening to the distant thunder of artillery. It was miles away now, but he could still feel it in the earth, each tremor like a memory refusing to settle. The German prisoner slept inside the tent, muttering in his dreams. Levi wondered if he dreamed of home, or of tanks, or of the same endless snow. He opened the compass again. The glass reflected the faint orange of the embers. He thought of his aunt's words, whispered years ago at Bangor Station, to keep you pointed home. But home wasn't a place anymore. It was a direction, a choice, a refusal to become what the war wanted him to be. He looked up at the stars. Most were hidden behind clouds, but one shone faintly above the tree line. For a moment, he imagined it was a flare, a signal, a point on some divine map guiding him forward. Then it flickered out. Levi smiled. Even light needed rest. By morning, new orders arrived. Whiskey 12 was to hold their position until further notice. No retreat, no movement, just wait. The war was still roaring somewhere beyond the trees, but for now, they were the silence between thunderclaps. The men repaired the gun, scraped frost off their weapons, patched holes in the tent. The rhythm of survival resumed. The world had moved on, but Levi hadn't. He checked the compass again, habit, not need. The needle twitched and held. He traced it with his thumb, thinking how fragile truth was, how easily it could break under pressure and still keep working. Down the slope, Dale was cleaning his rifle, slower than before, quieter. He caught Levi's eye and nodded once. It wasn't thanks, it was understanding. The kind that only exists between men who have seen what mercy costs. By the second night, the snow had stopped. The stars returned, clear and sharp as glass. Levi stood by the road, looking at the frozen wrecks, and thought about how quickly destruction turned into landscape. The tanks would stay there for weeks, maybe months, until spring thawed the road. Then engineers would cut them apart, haul them away, melt them down. Steel reborn for new wars. Always the same story, but he hoped quietly that one piece might remain. A fragment of armor, a track, a reminder that for one cold night in 1944, a handful of men stood in the way of inevitability and held. He closed his coat and turned toward camp. The wind had shifted. It carried the smell of smoke, far away but moving closer. Another battle, another place. The war was still feeding on itself, but Levi felt something in his chest, not hope, not peace, but direction. He tapped the compass once. The needle trembled, then pointed straight. Always southwest, always toward the fight. But this time, when he looked down, He didn't see angles or bearings. He saw choice, the thin, fragile line between survival and surrender, destruction and mercy. And for the first time, Levi Conincaid understood that not all victories are fired, some are held. By late December 1944, the Ardennes forest had become a graveyard of ambition. The German offensive that once promised to split the Allied front now crawled like a wounded animal, starving for fuel, direction, and time. Snow still fell, relentless as artillery, erasing tracks faster than men could make them. And in that whiteness, quiet, brutal, eternal private first class, Levi Conincaid still stood at his post, the brass compass cold against his chest. He walked the road again, boots crunching over ice, tracing the same 196 degrees angle he'd marked days before. The air stung his lungs, but he welcomed it. Pain meant direction. Direction meant life. As he walked, he saw the details others missed. The way frozen tire tracks curved just before the bend, the singed bark of trees near the impact zone, a single dog tag half buried in the snow, its chain stiff with blood. He picked it up, brushed it clean, and slipped it into his pocket. The name was unreadable, the metal scorched. It could have belonged to anyone. It could have belonged to him. By noon, orders came down from command. Hold position, expect counterattack. 4 days earlier, he and a handful of engineers had stopped 3 tanks with 1 gun, 1 plan, and 1 act of faith. The world would never know the geometry behind it, the math of desperation measured in degrees and seconds. But here, in the aftermath, time itself seemed to pause, as if the forest was waiting to see if courage had truly meant anything. The morning broke in fragments of light, weak sun, filtering through ice-crusted branches, turning the air silver. Frost had stiffened every surface, helmets, rifles, the edges of the map Levi still carried in his coat. The war for now was quiet, but quiet didn't mean safety. The men of Whiskey 12 were still dug in along the road, now buried beneath a new layer of snow. The 57mm gun was half frozen, its barrel crusted with ice, but it remained pointed toward the curve that had changed everything. The wrecks of 2 German panzers still blocked the path ahead, black silhouettes against the white expanse, like tombstones of iron. Levi checked his compass again. The crack on its glass had deepened, running across the face like a scar. The needle quivered and settled 196 degrees southwest, the same bearing, the same truth. He turned to the sergeant. "They'll come again," Levi said. "Yeah," the sergeant muttered, blowing into his hands. "But maybe not today." "Today's how you lose tomorrow," Levi said. And that was the rhythm of war, every hour bought in blood, every delay a promise that someone else, somewhere else, might live. By mid-morning, radio chatter began filtering through the static reports from Bastogne, whispers of Patton's Third Army pushing north through the storm. Reinforcements were moving, the German advance was breaking. The tide of history was turning in inches, not miles, but it was turning. Levi didn't celebrate. He was too tired to feel victory. He'd seen how it looked like smoke over steel, like snow swallowing footprints, like a boy shaking in the dark after almost pulling a trigger. The men groaned. They were running low on rations, lower still on morale. Half had frostbite setting in. Their medic supplies were gone, but they dug in again anyway, because that's what soldiers did. Levi helped the gun crew re-aim the 57mm, scraping ice from its breech, packing snow around its wheels for stability. Every movement was deliberate, mechanical, ritualistic. War was repetition. Aim, fire, reload, survive. When the wind shifted, he smelled diesel, the faint, unmistakable scent of engines moving somewhere beyond the trees. He froze. "They're coming," he said. The sergeant looked up. "You sure?" Levi held up the compass. "I always am." They took their positions. No jokes this time. No Captain Compass. Just breath and waiting. The snow began to fall harder, swallowing distance. Then, faint but rising a sound. The growl of tanks again. The ghosts were coming back. The second engagement was shorter, sharper, and far crueler. The German armor came fast, this time no hesitation, no decoy traps. They wanted the road cleared. The first shell hit the ridge before Levi could shout a warning. Dirt and ice erupted around them. The concussion flattened men to the ground. The 57mm gun survived the blast, but barely. Its barrel bent slightly, its sight cracked. Levi's ears rang. He tasted blood. But he crawled back to the weapon, shouting for the crew, "Load it! Aim low! Use the bend!" They obeyed, bodies moving like machinery. The second shell from the Germans hit closer, ripping a pine in half. The forest rained needles and splinters, but Levi stayed. He adjusted the gun by instinct, ignoring the smoke, the shaking, the terror clawing at his ribs. "Now!" he yelled. The 57mm fired. The shells screamed through snow and fog and struck the lead tank square in the side. A flash, then silence, then the roar of fire. The German line wavered. A second tank lurched forward, guns blazing. Levi ducked behind the ridge, heart hammering. The blast wave threw snow and debris across him. He couldn't see. He couldn't hear, only feel. When the noise cleared, the second tank was gone, its turret twisted, its hull half buried in the ditch. The forest was on fire now, orange flames licking through white snow, black smoke rising like a signal to heaven. The sergeant grabbed Levi's shoulder, shouting through the chaos, "We did it again!" Levi didn't smile. He looked at the compass in his hand. The needle had stopped trembling. For the first time, it pointed perfectly still. By dusk, the battle was over. The Germans had retreated, leaving the road blocked again by their own dead weight. Whiskey 12 had held, barely. The survivors gathered what was left. Half rations, one working radio, a single box of ammunition. They were ghosts now, burned and frozen, and breathing only because the math had worked again. Levi walked to the road's edge, his boots sinking deep into soot-mixed snow. The fire from the tanks reflected in his eyes, gold flickering in the monochrome world. Behind him, the sergeant spoke quietly. "You think anyone will ever know what happened here?" Levi didn't turn. "They'll know something happened. They just won't know who." "Hell of a legacy," the sergeant muttered. Levi shrugged. "The road's closed. That's what matters." And in the cold arithmetic of war, that was victory. Not glory, just delay. Delay meant life somewhere else. 3 days later, January 1st, 1945. The storm cleared. Reinforcements arrived, a wave of tired faces and fresh uniforms, too late for the worst of it, but just in time to take credit. They brought new guns, clean gear, hot food. They took photographs. Someone asked Levi to pose with his compass, the lucky charm. He refused. "It's not luck," he said. "It's direction." When command tallied the damage weeks later, they marked the location as insignificant, one of several minor engagements near Houffalize. But the truth was carved in steel and snow. That delay, those 36 hours, had fractured the German timetable, forced their fuel convoys off schedule, and crippled the momentum of the 5th Panzer Army. One bend in one nameless road had stolen an entire day from Hitler's war. Historians would call it logistics. Levi called it time well spent. When the snow finally melted in spring, the wrecks were cleared. The forest grew green again, and Levi Conincaid went home to Maine, to silence, to the sound of waves instead of artillery. He married once, worked in land surveying, mapping forests that reminded him of Ardennes, except these trees didn't hide monsters. He never joined veterans' parades, never told stories to school children. He spoke little, measured often, lived quietly. The compass stayed on his nightstand until he died in 1973. The crack never healed. The needle still pointed 196 degrees southwest. Years later, his nephew found it in a drawer, still warm from memory, still loyal to its bearing. He didn't understand what it had meant, only that the metal felt heavier than it should. The official histories of the Battle of the Bulge tell of tanks, generals, and divisions, of Patton's pivot, of Bastogne's stand. But somewhere between those grand maneuvers lies a smaller story, one made of snow, silence, and stubborn geometry. One man with a compass, one road, One decision not to shoot when he could have. Because restraint is also a weapon. War is measured in destruction. Character is measured in what you refuse to destroy. Levi understood that. He never called himself a hero because heroes chase headlines. He didn't chase anything he calculated. He trusted a broken compass and the instinct that humanity mattered more than orders. When asked years later why the German offensive failed, one historian wrote, "It broke not because of force, but because of friction, small moments of resistance that multiplied faster than the enemy could adapt." Friction. That was Levi's gift. He made the war stutter, and sometimes that's all it takes for the world to change its direction. The last image of him is imagined now, a black and white photograph that doesn't exist. Levi standing alone on that frozen road, smoke rising behind him, compass in his hand, his face half lit by fire, half hidden by snow, no medals, no fanfare. Just a man pointing quietly toward the right way forward. The war would end months later. Europe would thaw, the roads would open, but somewhere beneath layers of snow and memory, that one bearing 196 degrees southwest remains carved into the earth. A line between survival and surrender, between logic and chaos, between who we are and who we refuse to become. Because the smallest instruments can change the course of history. And sometimes the truest compass isn't the one that points north. It's the one that points home.